Hi there, this is Elisa with Elisa's Crafty Creations, and today we're going to be creating a Christmas card using stamps not initially intended for Christmas. The stamp set I'm using today is a clear stamp of the month for February 2023 called A Pocketful of Bunnies. The first thing I did was went ahead and used my finger to condition the stamp in the stamp set that I hadn't used yet. I then got out my Memento Black Tuxedo ink, which happens to be my favourite ink for using alcohol markers with, and placed a generous amount of ink onto each of the stamps. Once I'd inked up the stamps, I then went ahead and closed my MISTI tool to create an impression. And as you can see here, even those of us who've been doing it a long time making mistakes, as I did put the magnet in the wrong place. I then applied some pressure to the ink to help give a better impression. I did decide that it wasn't crisp enough yet, so I did go back in again with a second round of ink and went ahead and did a second stamping, again applying more pressure. Once I was happy with the stamped impressions, I went ahead and used my Lawn Fawn stamp chamois to clean my stamps and then put my MISTI away. Next I got out my alcohol markers, these are by Caliart, and selected the colour of grey for the first rabbit. So the next thing I did was grab my lightest grey alcohol marker and went ahead and started shading my first rabbit. I had intended these rabbits to look as much like my sister's rabbits as they could, and I'll insert a picture of them now. And I present my sister's rabbits, Nugget and Nutmeg. They both have cute little personalities, and I really wanted to make sure I highlighted them as the rabbits on this card due to who it was going to. So Nugget is a harlequin rabbit, which means that one side of his face is a different colour from the other, so I wanted to highlight this on one of the bunnies. So I'm going ahead with a darker shade of the grey alcohol markers, and then I'm going to go ahead and blend that with the lighter one. Now I will admit I am not an expert in colouring with alcohol markers. I've kind of watched a couple of tutorials here and there, and this is what works for me. But if you're interested in really learning how to use alcohol markers, I do recommend going out there onto YouTube and finding someone who actually specialises in alcohol markers as their main art. I then went in and placed some of the speckles, or I like to call him his freckles, on him, just to make him really stand out. And when I showed my mum this picture later on, she immediately knew which rabbit was which as well. So she knew, based on the picture, who I had created. So now that I've finished Nugget, I'm going to move on to Nutmeg's image. Now Nutmeg, as you saw from the picture, is a brown rabbit. So I went ahead and used a lighter colour of brown to colour her in, and then went and highlighted her with some of those darker inks, and then blended them together again. And whilst I finished doing this, we'll go ahead and have some music. Once my rabbits were coloured in, I went ahead and used the coordinating dies for the stamps and ran them through the Spellbinders Platinum machine using the universal adapter plates. I used the coordinating dies just to make it easier when I was fussy cutting, as it would reduce some of the labour for me. Once I die cut them out, I went ahead and grabbed my Tim Holtz scissors and went ahead and fussy cut around the rabbits to remove any of the Easter elements that would be showing on my rabbit. Now, as you see here on the Nutmeg one, I did leave the flowers at the bottom of her body, and that's because I already knew I would be covering them with my upper panel. So whilst I'm fussy cutting these out, let's again have some more music. So now the bunnies are completed, it's time to go ahead and do my top layer card that these rabbits are going to be poking out of. So first of all, I took a piece of red cardstock. This came from Michael's and it's a part of their Recollections range. And I took some Distress Oxide by Ranger Tim Holtz in the Candied Apple colour and just went ahead and added a little bit to the outside of the cardstock just to soften it and make it have more texture. Once I completed with the Candied Apple, I went ahead and grabbed Festive Berries and again did the same thing, just adding some to add some more dimension to the cardstock and give it that velvety look. And then finally I went in with some Fired Brick Distress Oxide, again just adding a little bit, mostly to the middle, to give that texturized look to the piece, as I did want this to look like it was a piece of velvet. To finish this off, I then went ahead and used some of my spritzer. This is also from the Tim Holtz range, just to help oxidize some parts of the paper to give it that sheen that we all love from Distress Oxide. Once I'd finished that, I went ahead and cleaned off my sticky mat with my stamp chamois and grabbed my Spellbinders embossed folder of the month, and this is the October 23 one. At the moment, Spellbinders are currently switching from it being a monthly to being able to buy it a la carte. I will link it as soon as it is available. And I went ahead and spritzed a piece of white cardstock and then placed it inside the embossing folder. I ran the embossing folder through my machine twice, and if you are wondering why I put water on my cardstock, it just helps the card fibres when it is going through the machine and stops it from cracking. Whilst I let that dry, I went ahead and started looking at my circle dies. I wanted to put my rabbits peeking out over these circle dies. So I went ahead and started looking at the different sizes to see which ones I wanted to use. In the end, I decided that both of the circles were going to be the same size. Once I decided where on the panel I wanted the circle, I went and used a little bit of Spellbinders tape to keep the die in place, and again got out of my Spellbinders platinum machine and ran the die cut through. And I had to do this twice to ensure I got 2 circles on my die cut. So there's circle 1 and there's circle 2, and I'm going to save the insides of those die cuts for another project. I then got a regular piece of A2 cardstock and my Tombow permanent adhesive roller, and I attached some tape runner to the back of the embossed panel and then added that to the A2 card base. This is just to give me some more stability whilst building the card up, and also to make it easier to adhere to the final card base. As you can see, when I was die cutting my piece, my tape did slightly rip my red cardstock. However, I still decided to use it, as where it had ripped was where I was planning to put other elements. I then got my bunnies and started to align them in the circles where I wanted them, and then using some Spellbinders tape created a hinge to make it easier to glue them to the cardstock. Once I was happy with the placement and placed the hinges, I removed the top layer and glued the top part of the bunnies down onto the cardstock. I did take care not to attach the bottom of the grey rabbit, which is representing Nugget's body, because I did want his paws to hang out the front of the card. Once those were attached, I went ahead and removed the tape that I'd used to create the hinge, and then placed glue on the back of the red panel. I use liquid adhesive glue because I find this makes it easier to move it around in place to get it in the correct position before it fully dries out. I'm also using my Misty stamping tool here to help me line up my panels. This just makes it a little bit easier. And as you see, as I had that wiggle room with the glue, I was able to slide the top panel under the paws of the grey rabbit before pressing it down and lining it up in place. At this point I realised that my panel had been a little bit too big for my embossed panel, but that's something I could fix very easily in a few minutes time, and I'll show you what I do there. The next thing I did was create my sentiments. So off screen I had die cutted some smaller circles, and I found a Merry Christmas sentiment that I really liked inside the clear stamp of the month of October 2023, which is named Festive Penguins. So again, I got my black tuxedo ink and stamped that onto one of those circle dyed cut pieces. And this gave me a good impression the first time, but I decided I wanted to have a really crisp image, so I did go ahead and double stamp that. Once I was happy with my image, I went ahead and used my Lawn Fawn stamp stamp to go ahead and clean my stamp and put the stamp and the Misty away. I then glued a second circle to the back of the sentiment just to provide some stability to the sentiment whilst it was in the mail. The next thing I did was go ahead and grab some of the pre-cut pieces I'd already made for Christmas. This included some holly, some pine needle branches, and also some poinsettias. So I went ahead and started arranging them onto the rabbits and deciding where they were going to go. And if you were wondering where I got these die cuts from, they actually came from the large die of the month for October 2022, which was a stitched ornament die that I also use a lot. And I definitely recommend cutting out numerous small dies like this if you're planning to make a lot of the same card. This has been a lifesaver this holiday season already with me creating my cards, and sped up my process when I'm in a creative mood. Once I decided where those die cuts were going to be placed, I went ahead and started adding Barely Arts adhesive glue to the back of those and starting to move them into place around the bunny's frame. I did this for both rabbits, changing up some of the branches for Holly on Nugget's frame. And whilst I do this, again, let's have a little bit more music. as I said earlier, I had a plan to help remove that slight bit of excess from the embossed panel. So I went ahead and grabbed my We Are Memory Keepers guillotine and just shaved that little edge off, and you wouldn't even know it was there now. The next thing I did was grab an A2 folded side base, and I went ahead and added liquid adhesive to my back panel that I used to assemble everything on, and attached that to the card base. And like I said, the reason I like adhesive liquid glue is because you can move it around a little bit if you don't get it perfect first time. Also, as you can see, I actually use my candy jar to help place pressure on my adhesive, and in this case I decided I wanted one as well, and they're the Prince of Peace ginger chews. I do have Meniere's disease, so I do get nauseous and very, very often, and often dizzy, so it's helpful to have that at arm's reach. The final step was to add some shimmer spray, so I grabbed my spritzing mat and sprayed some Imagine spritzing spray onto the card. And there we have a non-traditional stamp used in a Christmas card. Thanks for watching to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share this video with your crafty friends. And until next time, stay crafty.